Hi, good everyone. I'd like to call to order the September 24, 2024 Planning and Zoning Workshop. At this time, everybody would stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah,
we don't need to.
Pray that we stay awake. Just teasing.
Do we need to take attendance for the?
For purposes of the minutes, I would take attendance.
All right. Ms. McCollum? Ms. Wilson?
Here.
Ms. Douglas?
Here.
Mr. Woolen? Ms. Johnson? And Mr. Leidick. All right. I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. If it's okay with y'all, just because it's weird for me to talk like this, I'm going to talk from the podium down here. So. Jamie, you tell me when we're going to, okay. So the presentation tonight is a workshop. We're going to talk about quasi-judicial proceedings, and we're going to talk about Florida ethics laws. I've distilled down, this is a larger presentation that we use for our elected officials, and there are elements of Florida ethics laws that don't necessarily apply to this board. Let the record reflect Mr. Woolen has joined us. There are elements of the record laws that and sunshine law that don't necessarily apply to the Planning and Zoning Board, so I've truncated the presentation for purposes of this board to talk about the things that you're going to encounter. There are certain things that you won't encounter as a member of this board, but who knows, if you ever decide to move on to bigger and better things in the public office, then you'll get the full-blown presentation, but you'll have gotten part of it already. So anyway, this is prepared by our firm, Foltz Walker. And just moving straight into it, the first thing let's talk about is quasi-judicial hearings. I'm going to be looking up here and looking back and forth. Y'all just kind of, somebody just raise your finger if you need me to stop, and as soon as I see y'all, I'll stop and answer any question you got. So what is a quasi-judicial hearing? Excuse me, and when does it apply? So a quasi-judicial hearing is a hearing that determines legal rights of specific parties at a hearing. It applies to subdivision approvals, conditional use permits, rezonings, special exceptions, variances, anything like that. It does not apply to legislative decisions, which are, for example, budget approvals, city policies, city code amendments. Within the planning and zoning context, effectively everything that you're considering in here is going to be quasi-judicial in nature, except a text amendment to the land development regulations. And the reason is because that is a policy decision that is broadly applied to everybody that is using those regulations versus a special exception or a rezoning that applies to a single individual and an application of the law to a specific set of facts that are coming before you regarding a piece of property. And so we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but basically everything that you consider will be quasi-judicial except a text amendment and except certain future land use map amendments that affect the comprehensive plan. Those would not depend it. If it is a narrow future land use map amendment that only affects one individual and their property, it is the opinion of our firm that those should be handled in a quasi-judicial nature because they are decisions, although they're policy decisions about the future land use of land in the city, because it affects an individual and an individual's property. It is our legal opinion that they should be afforded the same level of due process that they would be afforded in the accompanying rezoning, if there is a rezoning of the land, and there would be at the same time. On the other hand, future land use map amendments, sometimes you may be reclassifying a whole swath of land. We have a city we represent that at one time in the past, and I think Brian may have been involved in this, where they changed the future land use classification of all land that was either a half block or a block, within a half block or a block of the main city thoroughfare, and changed the future land use, I believe, from whatever it was to some level of commercial or commercial retail. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
And when you're making a broad policy decision that affects multiple landowners, that is being done for the purpose of determining the future growth and growth patterns and the nature of that growth for the community, that's a policy decision, that's a legislative decision. And that can be made based on your judgment in a legislative form about what is good for the community, not using a quasi-judicial basis where you have to just base it on the evidence presented because it affects only one landowner. So that's why I'm giving this caveat on future land use map amendments. Most of what you're going to consider is probably going to be quasi-judicial in nature, because usually when you're considering them, it is because an individual property owner has a piece of property that they want to reclassify the future land use on, so that then they can subsequently also change the zoning. Maybe it's classified as agriculture and they want to use it for residential, or maybe it's been, had a previous residential use and residential classification, but they want to change that use to perhaps some new commercial development because the city is growing, and what was previously residential may now be better used for a commercial or industrial purpose. And so they want to reclassify that future land use as a precursor to then getting it rezoned, because within each future land use, you've got multiple available zoning categories that you can zone it as. And so anyway, kind of followed a rabbit there, or chased a rabbit, but at any rate, quasi-judicial is going to be most of your decisions that you consider here. So what is a hearing? What is a quasi-judicial matter? When does it apply? As I mentioned earlier, you're applying the facts of a particular situation to the city's land use code or land use regulations. They're like a court proceeding, which is why we call them quasi-judicial. They have to be based on competent and substantial evidence. And the key to that is it's got to be based on evidence, information that you've received in the hearing. And so at a minimum, that's why you will hear me asking either Robert or asking the engineer or the applicant, are you moving your presentation? Are you moving the city staff report into evidence? Because many times in fact, most of the time for the things you consider, that's going to be the only evidence you've got available to you to base your decision on, is what is in the applicant's presentation, what is in their application, what is in the staff report, and that's it. You're not going to hear a lot of testimony. Robert was here, Ms. McCollum was here for it, and the chair was here for it back in January. We had I believe it was the site plan approval for Circle K, and that one it lasted for 3 nights, I believe, and three very long nights. And it was very much like a trial. I mean, we had witnesses, we had examination, we had cross-examination, we had opening and closing, we had redirects, we had maps and diagrams and traffic studies and all of this, and in that particular hearing. So I mean, it was very much more formal than you normally have in your meetings as you've experienced them. It was much more formal. There was much more deliberation. You had me in particular as the members were deliberating up here. interacting with them to say, you just said that traffic at this intersection was an issue based on the evidence that you heard from the traffic engineer. Is that a basis for your position that this ought to be denied? Because we had to come back at a following meeting and present for approval a very detailed resolution that outlined the basis for the denial. That was the decision that was rendered by the body. We'll talk about that in just a second too. But anyway, you've got to base your decision on evidence, and then the level of evidence that you have to base your decision on must be competent and substantial. And what that means is competent, it has to have come from somebody that has some knowledge about what they're talking about. That's about the best way that I can say competent. It has to come from someone who knows something about what they're talking about. And then substantial, it has to have substance. It has to have some meat to it to be able to consider it. It can't be just some broad brush blanket statement. There needs to be something there that you can sink your teeth into. And that's something that I'll help you with in many meetings. If I hear you starting to reason through why you're doing something, you may hear me ask you questions and just answer the questions. I'm not trying to steer you in a particular direction. I'm trying to help you flesh out your thought process, and I'm making notes on that so that I can put together the written order that needs to come back for you to vote on at a subsequent meeting. So if you ever hear me, asking it, I'm not questioning your decision making. I'm trying to flesh out what you're saying so that I can more clearly state it in the written document. Now that said, most of what you're going to have is a boilerplate approval resolution, because granted, most of the time you're going to approve, you have that. Just historically, the body tends to approve what comes before it because it's been well prepared, it's been well researched by staff. Any problems that do exist, staff has worked with the applicant before it even gets to you to try to noodle through that and get to a solution. So most of what comes before you do tend to approve historically, and usually it's non-controversial. And so usually we have already come to the meeting with a resolution prepared in anticipation of what we think you're going to do that lays out in a bare fashion the basis for your approval and assumes you're going to approve. If you don't approve, then we will go back to the drawing board and we'll put together a resolution denying the application, and we'll bring it back at a subsequent meeting for action. So here we talked about competent, substantial. The commission's role according to the Florida League of Cities, and this says Planning and Zoning Board is what it should say. You're acting like a court. The process of decisions cannot be prejudiced. Your decision must be based on the information provided, and staff helps develop the city's record for the case, and they may also make recommendations and be subject to cross-examination. When we talk about prejudice, that you can't have prejudged the application, and that's why you'll hear me in the process that we go through asking you individually if you've had any ex parte communications, because we need you to declare those. It's not a bad thing if you've had them, unless, because if you ever answer yes, when I'm going down the dais and I say, have you had any ex parte communications on this? We'll talk about what that is in a second, but and you answer yes, my next question is going to be, would that discussion, would that communication, with the things that you learned as a result of that communication, affect your ability to give a fair and impartial hearing to the applicant and the other participants in tonight's meeting? If you say yes, then I'm going to ask you to recuse yourself, and that means you just don't participate, and it's not the end of the world. It happens sometimes. If you say no, then we're going to just move on and you'll participate. But it's not a big deal. I mean, it happens more often than you think in other cities where a particular member of the board may have a passionate feeling about something or have heard something that they just can't overcome. And if that's the case, just disclose it. Not disclosing it and then us finding out later somehow that's the problem. That's when we've got a problem. That's when the city finds itself perhaps in litigation. You may find yourself the subject of an ethics commission complaint, that sort of thing. So just disclose it. It's not a big deal. Let's see, ex parte communication. So they're conversations that are had outside of the hearing. Somebody stops you in the grocery store, and maybe even inadvertently because they're your neighbor, and they just say, "Man, did you hear about that new development that's going on?" They don't even know you sit on this board. And you may say, "Well, I sit on the planning and zoning board, I'm gonna have to hear that. It might be best if we don't discuss it." But if they continue, or if you do happen to discuss it, you know, you're a public official. You're a voluntary public official, but a volunteer official, but you are a public official. Listen to what they have to say, but then just disclose it at the meeting. And if it's so over the top that you can't be fair and impartial, then just don't participate. It's not a huge deal. And here, you know, one court said they're inadvisable and inherently improper. And then we talk about the disclosure again. So yeah, if you can avoid it, avoid it. If you can't, you can't. But if you can't, then
What if it's brought up after the fact, after it's all been voted, it doesn't matter, right?
I'm sorry.
What if it's brought up after it's already been voted on, like 2 weeks later?
That somebody talks to you
Yeah,
about it?
yes.
Yeah, then after that, it's
It
fine.
is.
You can talk about things that you've already voted on as much as you want to.
Okay.
But anything prior to the vote is when it's an issue.
Okay.
So,
Clay, and I just wanted to point out, one of the things it says there is, talks about if you've received a written communication, I would say and I'm sorry, I'm Brian Thomas, I'm the new planner with Robert, in Growth Management. If you get a written communication from somebody relative to something that you are going to hear, if you would send it over to staff, staff will include that in the packet so that it's on, that there's a record of it going into the official record. And you can still disclose it, but then it's already been accounted for in the record.
it's out in the open. Now, that communication that you received is still ex parte. I would still suggest that you disclose it even though you forwarded it over to staff. And I'm still gonna ask if it affected you, and if it did, even though it's been fully disclosed, even though it's been fully distributed to everybody else, if for you it affects your ability, then say so and recuse yourself. And we'll talk in a second too, but while we're on the topic, a written communication to you regarding the business of the board would be a public record, and it needs to be disclosed anyway, just for purposes of keeping a record of it. Because 5 years from now, somebody could come back to the city and say, "Can you give me a copy of the application and all of the communications and the YouTube video of the hearing on this particular matter?" And we would need to include that. And if you've already provided it, then it's not a big deal. If you fail to, and then the city doesn't disclose it, and then somehow it is, becomes known to the world that it exists, that could present problems. So, any of your communications, written communications that relate to the board, probably the safer. Do they have city email addresses?
Yes.
Okay, so we're capturing them if they come in through your city email anyway. If it comes into a personal address, forward it over to your city address to capture it in that system. If it's not electronically communicated to you electronically, it's on a handwritten something, then just make sure that Robert gets a copy of it, and he can make sure, as Brian was saying, that it gets included in the packet so that everybody sees it and it'll continue to travel with it.
Basically, just scan it in and send it over through our email to our city account and then forward it, right?
You can do that if you've got a scanner. If you don't, just make sure he gets it.
Okay.
So he can make a copy of it for his own records and then give you back your original if you want, or however you want to do it. Things to avoid: prejudging facts or parties prior to the hearing. personal opinions or attitudes evidencing bias for or against a party, personal interest in the outcome, obligation of impartiality governs not just judges, but anyone acting in a judicial or quasi-judicial capacity. So, those are things to just watch out for. If it's a piece of property that's too close to you, and somehow it may, inure to your gain or detriment because of its proximity, not in the way it applies to everybody, but to you kind of in a special way because of your proximity to it, you may want to pick up the phone and call them. If you ever need to discuss anything regarding sunshine law, records, quasi-judicial matters, ethics, I'll make sure you've got my card, but just reach out to Robert and he can connect you with me and we can talk and figure it out. Because I'd rather figure it out on the front end than the back end. So
We need a copy of this.
Let me see what I can do. I'll get you a copy. I think we can convert it into a PDF, but the real reason I'm hesitant is because this is such a thumbnail. I want to look and see if I can find something, if it's going to be in writing and I'm going to hand it to you that may have a little more meat on it, because I think that'll be more
Well,
helpful.
this is just, this is a good teaching.
Yes. But as far as something for you to reference on your
Yes.
own, I'd like something that might have a little more meat to it than this. And I may have something, every city and county in Florida follows the same body of law. And attorneys are stealing from each other all the time. So I may send out an email to all of the other city and county attorneys in the state and say, hey, do you have a good written reference? We've got a PowerPoint, but do you have a good written reference that I can steal from you and present to my board members? So,
But this also is just, it's,
To the point.
yeah, right, exactly. It's not all wordy and you don't get lost. It's really,
okay,
it's
we
really
can get you the PowerPoint and give it to you in a PDF, and we can give it to you where you can make some little notes on the side, that kind of thing. Not a big deal, but I guess for me, I would think something with more
well,
meat
you
is
did
good.
good,
But
man. That is,
I can't take credit for it. I didn't prepare this. It was prepared by a couple of other attorneys in the office. Foundations of ethical requirements. So the Florida Constitution is the ultimate foundation for our ethical requirements. Actually, what our mama taught us in kindergarten is probably the real foundation, and that's probably, if all else fails, you need a gut check. If I was to talk to my mama about this, what would she tell me? Might be a good gut check about whether you need to pursue it a little further or not. But anyway, legally, the Florida Constitution, the Code of Ethics for Public Officers and Officials, which is Florida Statute 112. Criminal laws do apply because violations of the ethics laws can constitute a misdemeanor. And then just general common law. When in doubt, ask. I would say we've actually put up there the Florida Commission on Ethics hotline. I would say call us first. Even if we need to reach out to the Ethics Commission, we may be able to help frame the question in a way to get the answer that we're looking for, rather than including in the conversation with them issues that really aren't pertinent to the heart of the issue. The Ethics Commission is an appointed commission in the state of Florida. It's appointed by the governor, and possibly some of the members may be appointed by the Florida House and the Florida Senate, but they're an appointed body. They investigate complaints and recommend penalties when necessary. Just as a check, in 2022, the Commission on Ethics received 223 complaints. 65 of them were ordered investigated, and then we don't have the number below that where the investigation resulted in a referral back to the Ethics Commission for action. But you're already at less than a third, probably getting close to a quarter of those that were received were actually investigated, and then only a fraction of the 65 were actually referred back. And this is just a breakdown again on the number of complaints. Here we go. 61 were pending a legal sufficiency determination as of December 31 of last year. So we don't have the outcome of those 61 moving into 2024. So prohibited actions or conduct misuse of public position, disproportionate benefit to you as a member of the board, willful failure to file your annual report. So December 31 of this year, you will be required going into 2025 to file what is called a Form 1 ethic or reporting form. And it's a form where you go in and report your financial interests. It's very innocuous. It sounds threatening, but it's pretty innocuous for the average person to fill out. You just have to report people that you owe money to. You have to report, because I'm trying to think back to mine, I have to fill one out too as city attorney. But who you owe money to, where you have assets over a certain amount. So, I have to report stocks, bonds, any bank accounts over a certain amount, that kind of thing, and sources of income. You don't have to present the amounts. I mean, people can infer it because if you're reporting it, they know it's over a certain amount, but beyond that, you don't have to give any more detail. Those have to be done online now as of this year. They used to be done on paper and submitted to the supervisor of elections in your county. Now they're done online and directly submitted to the Commission on Ethics. So when the time comes next year to do it, you'll have to open your own account, and hopefully all the bugs will have been worked out since this was the first year. And I really didn't experience any bugs. It was actually pretty easy, but you'll have to go through that process. So that's when it says willful failure to file. Voting conflicts of interest, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Solicitation or acceptance of gifts, unauthorized compensation, disclosure or use of certain information. Let's see here. So don't do it. Misuse of position. Let's see, no public officer, employee of an agency or local government attorney shall corruptly use or attempt to use his or her official position any property or resource which may be within his or her trust to perform his or her official duties to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for himself, herself, or others. So you can't use your position to benefit yourself or somebody else or get an exemption for them that they're not otherwise entitled to. You're here to serve a public purpose and serve the public. This is an example, and there are several of these in here. I'm probably going to go through them pretty quickly, but this was the mayor of Miami faced allegations he misuses influence as a city leader in order to help a real estate developer cut through red tape, secure permits for a $70 million project in Coconut Grove that was at risk of being delayed. Miami Herald also reported that Suarez was also working as a paid consultant for this same developer for 2 years. Wow. So I'm going to stop there. I mean, you just know it doesn't, gut check, it doesn't feel right. The Herald said it obtained corporate documents from the developer that chronicle meetings that were held the prior summer and fall between Location Ventures, Suarez, and the city manager to move along the Coconut Grove project. The meeting was reportedly to discuss a zoning hurdle that would have cost developers more time and money and redesigns without a waiver from the city. Now, in and of itself, the fact that they had the meeting, not a big deal, but when the mayor's on the payroll of the developer, that got a problem. So, see, this is another Ethics Commission finds probable cause against, I can't remember, I think he's State Senator Randy Fine now in a dispute with the city of West Melbourne. He abused his position to obtain a disproportionate benefit, and he misused his positioning by threatening to take away state funding over a personal feud with a Brevard County school board member. And he interfered in a council member's response to a records request for communications related to the dispute. He called the Ethics Commission a kangaroo court. He said its findings were politically motivated, and see, the Ethics Commission has a personal axe to grind with myself and my politics. So,
And he's still in the Senate.
and he's still in the legislature, yes. But his matter, if you go Google him at home tonight, all of this is still pending. It ain't over yet.
Oh.
So, and then this one, Tampa Police Chief resigns amid investigation over flashing a badge to get out of a traffic ticket. She was riding, the police chief in Tampa was riding around our community in a golf cart. A deputy sheriff, I think, pulled her over for, not having a light or some kind of marking on the golf cart that she was supposed to have. And she flashed her badge to try to get out of the encounter. And actually, I wound up losing her position as chief of police in Tampa, all over probably what was a less than $200 traffic citation and a little bit of embarrassment. So anyway, penalties for violating.
What was that? Oh, Connor thing, what was that?
Oh, that was just the same thing I just.
Oh, okay,
telling you.
gotcha.
Potential penalties for violations or removal from office. If you're an employee, suspension of employment without pay or termination, demotions, reductions in salary, forfeitures of salary, civil penalties. That's what could kick in for you as volunteer members if you violate as civil penalties. You could be required to give restitution if there was some kind of damages that was caused to another, or you could even be required to restore someone who brought the ethics complaint against you and make them whole for their legal fees. Public censure and reprimand if you were an employee, loss of retirement. So, conflicts of interest, a member of a board who's present at a meeting at which an official designation, ruling, or other official act is to be taken or adopted may not abstain from voting unless there appears to be a possible conflict of interest. So, if the only way you can abstain is if you've got a conflict. If it's just too tough a decision, it's not a reason. You gotta bite the bullet and make a decision. But if you've got a conflict of interest, then you don't have to vote on it. So you just need to declare it. We'll get you with Robert. There's a certain form you fill out for the Ethics Commission where you put down what the nature of the conflict of interest is and turn it in, and it's all good. So.
Just for clarification, isn't it also, I mean, it's pretty much the case that generally you need to be having some sort of pecuniary interest, not just, oh, this is gonna make my friends upset with me.
Correct. I mean, it needs to be, usually it's money, and not necessarily for you. I mean, your conflict could be that your daughter works for this developer, and the perception could be that by you voting on or approving this particular application for a rezoning, that your family member could receive a pecuniary or have some pecuniary interest in it. And so, it's not only you, it's also close family members. But basically, if you can't use your independent judgment to make a decision, then you've got a conflict. And even if you feel like, I'm not sure if this is or isn't, just reach out to Robert, reach out to me, let's talk about it, let's kind of flesh through it and see if it really is. Because if it's not, we need to advise you to vote. If it is, we need to advise you to declare it, and there's not a lot of middle ground. So, again, if something your mama told you, that gut check, if it's bothering you, you need to reach out and let us know. Once you act improperly, then we can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. You may be able to self-declare and come clean and avoid any kind of heavy penalty, but there probably still would be a penalty. So, let's see. Inure to his or her special private gain or loss, inure to the special private gain or loss of any principal by whom he or she is retained, or to the parent organization, or which he or she knows could inure to the special private gain or loss of a relative or business associate. So there you go. As we said, announce, disclose, abstain, file the form. You don't have to leave the room. Whoever prepared this, put in there, get off the dais. I'm not a big proponent of getting off the dais. You're still a member of the board. You're still there. That said, if you can't wear a poker face and you can't sit there, just get down. But if you can wear a poker face and stare at the clock on the back of the wall and not make eye contact for the 30 minutes or however long the hearing is going on for the typical hearing, step down. If you can do that, then stay at the dais. But I don't think it's a requirement. It just depends on the person and you know, the nature of the issue that's before the board. Special private gain or loss, economic benefit or harm, what is the size of the affected class, is the result remote and speculative, and is this merely a preliminary or procedural matter? And those are all things that we would need to kind of talk through depending on the nature of the application before you. When it talks about size of affected class, this actually, as I understand it, historically was actually the case that at some point in the past, Lake City was actually on the short list of locations for Walt Disney World. You know, if that were to happen today, and Walt Disney World wanted to locate, you know, on property between here and Loudoun, certainly that would create an economic boom for the community. But it's not special enough for you because it applies to everybody. So everybody generally would benefit. A few, it would be a detriment to them, but everybody would generally benefit if that were to happen. So that kind of benefit applies to everybody. But if you have no land next to where this is going to go, that's a special benefit because you're going to be the primary beneficiary of them locating that theme park next to your land. That's something where you would need to recuse yourself in those cases. Or on the other hand, if because you feel like it's going to be a detriment to your family farm and your way of life, specifically for you, and you don't want this thing going, this monstrosity going next to you. Same thing. It's a conflict. You can't be impartial. You know, on multiple levels, both on the quasi-judicial level and on the just general conflict of interest level, you would probably need to reach out and let's talk through it and see if it is something we need to have you step away from. So, gifts, presents. No officer, which would be you, public officer, or you two, employee of an agency, local government, or local government attorney, that's me, shall solicit or accept anything of value, including a gift, loan, reward, promise of future employment, favor or service based upon any based upon any understanding that the vote, official action, or judgment of the public officer, employee, or local government attorney or candidate would be influenced. Somebody, you know, you really might even know from the community, but they've never shown any interest in you, invite you to lunch one day, and they happen to be a real estate developer or something like that. You can certainly go to lunch. You can certainly talk with them. You know, we've got the whole issue of ex parte communications that you would need to disclose, but you can still go to lunch with them. You can still sit down, and when they offer to pick up that check, you need to say, no, I'll get my lunch and pay for yours, because otherwise you've got potential ex parte communications issues, you've got potential conflict of interest issues, you've got the potential for an improper gift, and so you know you're starting to layer things, but you know you can cure a lot of that just by paying your own way. You know, don't accept the cap. I mean, just don't. It's just not worth it. Don't accept anything like that. You would be surprised, even as innocuous as it may sound. You can still do something that can be spun up into something it's not, and we've got to take a look at that. And then you may not be able to do the job that you volunteered to do, all because of a misstep where there was really no intent. And now we're down a valued member of the board. Each of you, the longer you're here, you're going to develop certain areas of interest and expertise. Mr. Leidick is very knowledgeable in historic preservation. You'll each kind of develop your own areas, and if we lose you in a decision-making process, I mean, it's easy to say, well, I'll just sit back and let everybody else make the decision. When we lose you, we're losing a valued member of the board that everybody has co-invested time in to educate them about certain issues in these meetings, and we're down a person. So, it sounds like, well, it's okay, But if it's something where you can help it and keep yourself in a position where you can help the board make a decision and contribute to the decision-making process, try to preserve that position. So give me just a second.
Sounds like we need to get paid.
It's actually pretty easy to do. I mean, I've been in jobs that have these rules in place for a good portion of my life, either jobs or volunteer positions, and after a while it just becomes second nature to kind of live that way. You just learn to pay your own way, pick up your own tab, and be careful about what you do and who you talk to and what you talk about. So, back to Mayor Suarez, State opens ethics probe into his Formula One World Cup tickets. Let's see. Event ticket dinners and other things he received are valued at tens of thousands of dollars. See, he accepted tickets to the 2022 Miami Formula One Grand Prix and World Cup. Let's see. State law mandates that elected officials or appointed officials, in your case, must disclose the sources of all gifts worth $100 or more and prohibits them from accepting gifts from vendors, lobbyists, or employers. There is that $100 limit in there, but the better thing to do is just don't call your judgment or your position into question over a $20 lunch bill. It's just not worth it. It's kind of back to the police chief who lost her job over what would have been a probably less than $200 traffic infraction. It's just not worth it. Miami Herald was first to report the investigation Wednesday. So Suarez, the complainant alleged that Suarez did not file a required gift disclosure for the VIP access pass he accepted to the Formula One event. The complaint also says he failed to file a disclosure for a trip in December for the World Cup in Qatar, where he was pictured alongside soccer star David Beckham in a luxury skybox. The reason that is relevant is Beckham was a registered lobbyist in the city of Miami for the Miami Freedom Park, a company that he co-owned that is building a Major League Soccer stadium. So, report. If you're given an honorary membership at the local country club, report it. A sheriff, let's see, or no, this was commissioner, there was another one that was a sheriff. County commissioner was found to have misused his position, but, okay, so we're shifting now from gifts to another ethics issue, which is misuse of position by sharing confidential transcripts. It really would probably not apply to you, but if you learn of something confidentially through your position, you need to maintain that confidence. In this case, I think the issue was there are certain meetings that the city council can have that are referred to as shade meetings. If the city is actively in litigation in those cases, the council to discuss litigation strategy on that particular matter can have a closed door meeting. It's like one of the only times there's that, and I think collective bargaining process, the council can have a closed door meeting to discuss negotiation strategy in the collective bargaining process when they're negotiating with a city union. And then the other is when they're in active litigation with the party. And there is an obligation on the council members that they cannot disclose to the public what happens behind those closed door meetings. Those are confidential. And in this case, this county commissioner disclosed it, violated the law, and was held to account for it because he was sharing inside information. Let's see, another one issue, misuse of confidential information. Let's see, some of these I missed, some of these I intended to take out, or I took out part of the segment, but not all of it. So here's one. An ex-Collier official, Collier County, lobbied for a county vendor in an apparent conflict of interest. He was fired after he was discovered while he was an employee of the county, secretly working as a lobbyist for a DC law firm. our lobbying firm, and that moonlighting job violated county policies and ethics guidelines and anti-fraud measures. So ethics violations and attorney's fees. I lost my case, my attorney's fees, their attorney's fees, and my shirt. So basically, you can be required, if you lose the ethics matter, you have to pick up your own attorney's fees, you may have to pick up the complainant's attorney's fees, and then you may have to pay a fine on top of that. So that is general ethics law. Now let's go into sunshine law. All meetings in which official acts are taken or public business is transmitted are public meetings and open to the public at all times. Why do we need sunshine? You've got two little cartoons there. Hey, Mr. Government Official, what's going on under there? And the government official under the cloak of secrecy says, trust me, you don't need to know. And then the other one is more Florida specific. Why don't you cast a shadow? And the government official says, because I'm one of the good ones, I'm transparent. Has the sunshine behind him. So what is required for a meeting? Reasonable notice, open to the public, and promptly recorded minutes. Generally speaking, the minimum reasonable notice you can give for a non-emergency meeting of a governing body is 3 days. Now, for the types of decisions you have to make, because we've got all of the advertising requirements involved associated with that, I don't think that's ever going to come into play with this particular body. But it does come into play with council if they need to have an emergency meeting. It really got to be an emergency, and there needs to be 3 days notice. There are narrower, and within the context of events, there may be a narrower time frame if it's truly an emergency. Like, for example, the hurricane coming, that really didn't pop up on everybody's radar screen until yesterday. And yesterday afternoon, they called a meeting for tomorrow morning, but the very narrow issue of that meeting is merely for them to vote on declaring a state of emergency for the city, and that's it. So no other business will be transacted. What is reasonable notice? Reasonable time, reasonable manner for providing the notice, the location and time, of course, the name of the board or committee that's meeting, and it depends on the circumstances. Open to the public, located within the city, a fixed location, no physical or psychological barriers, must be able to hear what's going on, and public must be able to attend. Sunshine and First Amendment rights. Sunshine law helps ensure that citizens' First Amendment rights are protected. The public has the right to be present, to be heard. That's what they refer to as the anti-shushing law. And public participation, though, is not an absolute right. The city can adopt rules and reasonable rules to allow for order in public meetings. Reasonable rules like a time limit on the amount of comment that can be provided by a member of the public. Trying to think, of course, the nature and tenor of the presentation that they're giving, not directing their comments to other members of the public. They're here to address the board. So to restore order in the meeting, you want the comments addressed to the board. Now, they can be particularly terse and perhaps even border on the offensive, or sometimes maybe be downright offensive in the comments that they give to the board. That is their First Amendment right to you. Now, folks sitting out here, they didn't sign up for that. And so if the direction of the comments starts to be redirected from here to there, then all of a sudden maybe those rights to address in a public forum get reeled back in, and maybe they're removed from the meeting if they don't reel in the manner of their comments in the meeting itself. So anyway. Minutes must be written, must be promptly recorded, and that doesn't mean audio recording, just create the record promptly.
Like this. Promptly recorded.
Yeah. Good, okay. And then votes, actions, and significant decisions are what needs to be in the record. It doesn't need to be a verbatim transcript. We just need to have a record of how people voted, what they were voting on, and any significant discussions that took place. Not everything, but you know, if there was something that took up a large chunk of the meeting, we need to memorialize that. And then we have the scope of the Sunshine Law applies equally to elected and appointed boards. It's applied to gatherings of 2 or more members of the same board to discuss some matter which will foreseeably come before that board for action. And then the judiciary and legislature are not subject to the Sunshine Law. Even though you sit in quasi-judicial capacity, still applies to you. But it's that middle one. It's applied to gatherings of 2 or more members of the same board to discuss a matter which will foreseeably come before the board for action. You know, if Ms. Wilson and Ms. Douglas show up to the church together, you see each other on Sunday, and y'all want to talk about the weather, you want to talk about how the football team did last Saturday, or if it's high school last Friday, or talk about the upcoming church dinner or lunch or something like that, all game. But just can't talk about something that might come before this board. So, let's see, discussion, what is a meeting? We just talked about that. That can include written communications back and forth, emails, texts. It can include daisy chaining, which is where that usually involves a staff member, where a staff member will talk to one of you, and then they'll talk to a second member of the board, but say to the second member what was learned from the first member. So now there has been a communication from member 1 to member 2 via the staff member, and so forth. But that's daisy chaining. Be careful about discussions before and after meetings. You know, those discussions you have on the way out as you're walking to your car about something that happened or may happen again or come before the board again or something like that. Just be cautious about those. Social media posts, same thing. I would caution you against any social media posts or responding to posts that concern matters that are either before the board or could come before the board. Sunshine Law is broadly construed and exemptions are narrowly construed. There are some exemptions to it. You know, if you, there are so many I don't even attempt to remember them all, but if you've got an issue, reach out to me. We'll see if we can figure out if there's an exemption or not. A couple of exceptions: collective bargaining, executive sessions, shade meetings we talked about, and social functions. Of course, you can get together socially, just can't talk about city business. You know, this was a case where, you know, a school board had the best of intentions. They were doing a tour of neighborhoods for potential new schools. They took all kinds of precautions to avoid Sunshine Law violations by sitting apart, not discussing the locations, but because the board had so they did a bus tour. That was how they did it. They sat separately on the bus. But they had the opportunity at the time they were doing that tour to make decisions outside of the public scrutiny. The public could not be there to see and react to what the members of the school board were seeing and reacting to. And that was sufficient to be a violation of the Sunshine Law, even though they had the best of intentions. So, let's see. In this case, a boundary committee exchanged emails and conversations about committee business outside of the public meetings. Even though the superintendent was a non-voting member, the Sunshine Law applied to him because he was a part of the decision-making process. So, you know, on many occasions on some boards, we have non-voting members, and because they don't vote, they can communicate with other board members about the business of the board because they're not actually a member of the board, they're an independent third party. But if they participate to influence the decision-making process, then they can, so that can get to be a gray area. It doesn't apply here necessarily. Penalties: removal from office, attorney's fees, second-degree misdemeanor to knowingly violate the Sunshine Law. That's where criminal penalties come into play, and then fines up to $500 and or 60 days of imprisonment. So it was a second-degree misdemeanor. Let's see. an action is taken at a meeting that is not an open meeting, then it's an invalid action. Now, the way you can cure it in most cases is to come back in a second meeting and hold the hearing again and do a do-over. But that doesn't always necessarily fix it, and it may not cure any individual liability for members of the board who created the problem to begin with by having the decision-making process occur outside of the sunshine. Let's see, this one, 2 commissioners reportedly attended a lunch meeting with a county administrator and a building industry representative to discuss streamlining county operations. Apparently what happened is originally it was supposed to be 1 commissioner, 1 administrator, 1 building industry official, and a second commissioner, I guess, walked in on them at lunch at whatever restaurant they were at and decided to sit down with them and join the conversation, and boom, all of a sudden what was a perfectly great opportunity for 3 people to discuss became an impermissible opportunity for 4. So, and then this is an ongoing commentary on that same case. No, wait, let me flip out, different case. 3 members of the Sebastian City Council were not allowed to privately discuss foreseeable government issues, did so anyway. They decided amongst themselves as their personal protest to the mayor and city manager's decision to cancel a regularly scheduled city council meeting because of COVID, to enter the city council chambers and conduct the canceled meeting anyway. Meeting was canceled. They were in there talking. They took some votes. That was a sunshine law violation. That is the ongoing thought about that. Let's see. County Chairwoman Ruthie Schlabeck committed a governance sunshine law violation when she initiated an impromptu conversation with another commissioner. Let's see. During Monday's groundbreaking for a county road widening, she confronted, she told her to stop telling people that she intentionally prevented a border security resolution from getting on the agenda. Let's see. Finnegan told Schlabeck she didn't want to discuss the matter because it could be seen as a violation of the Sunshine Law, which prohibits commissioners from talking about a potential voting matter. Finnegan said she felt uncomfortable during the exchange. She mostly listened but defended her views that Schlabeck worked to quash her agenda item. Had Schlabeck stopped discussing the resolution after Finnegan told her about the Sunshine Law, it would not be a violation, said a First Amendment Foundation expert. However, the fact that she continued talking makes it a violation. So if somebody ever does say, hey, hang on a minute, just step back.
Right.
Practice of requiring speakers to provide their name or address prior to speaking actually violates rights under the First Amendment and under the public comments statute of Florida statutes. So people have a right, without identifying themselves or who they are or where they live, to get up here and say whatever it is they want
But
to
we
say.
always ask, right?
We do ask, and if somebody says I don't want to, we can't keep talking. It's something we actually probably need to talk about citywide, because that may have a chilling effect on somebody who wants to address the board but doesn't, because doing so would require them to state their name and address. So it is something we need to address internally. Florida Constitution, this is now the public record. So we talked about open meetings, this is now public records. Every person has the right to inspect or copy any public record made or received in connection with the official business of any public body, officer, or employee of the state, or persons acting on their behalf. So we'll talk about it in a second, but if you write it down for yourself, only for yourself, it's not a public record. If you write it down to perpetuate knowledge or communicate the idea to somebody else, or for purposes of using it to develop a fuller document on the subject, your notes that you make up there at the dais are discoverable. So, as a public record, so just know that. Confidential versus exempt, they both require a statutory authorization. An exempt record is one the agency is neither required nor prohibited to disclose. So in In this case, the city, if it's an exempt record, we as the city can decide whether we want to disclose it or not to take advantage of the exemption. A confidential record, on the other hand, is one that is not subject to inspection and may not be released except to a person authorized to receive it by statute. And the city bears the burden of proving the right to an exemption. Confidential record might be one where it's the social security number of an employee, that kind of thing. Only the legislature may exempt records from public disclosure. Exemptions are strictly construed, and an agency claiming an exemption bears the burden of proving the right to the exemption. Confidential records would include social security numbers, EMS records that contain patient treatment information, work papers related to the internal audit of the city, but it would become public when the audit becomes final. So some of these may be a matter of timing when it becomes open. Flipping back to it, the shade meeting exemption for the city council to discuss pending litigation. Even in that case, they have to have a court reporter present to make a transcript of everything that's said, and after the litigation is over with and the lawsuit is done, that transcript gets made public, so the public still can see what happened behind closed doors. They just get to do it after the litigation is concluded, so that those discussions don't impact the outcome of the litigation per se. In other words, you don't want your opponent in court knowing what your legal strategy is. Here we talked about notes. Must be for your own personal use and not intended to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge. Public record, we're still on notes. Any material prepared in connection with official agency business which is intended to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge of some type. There's not an exception for unfinished business or drafts of documents or something like that. So, is it a public record? The city manager takes handwritten personal notes to assist in remembering matters discussed during the manager's interview of city employees, and no one has seen the notes. Would that be, in that example, would that be a public record?
No, not if he keeps it to himself, right? For
Right.
personal use.
Yeah.
Correct analysis, yes.
Right.
It's for his use, for himself, and only for him. And that's what we just, if they were dictated to his assistant or anyone else, then they would become a
Or
record.
if somebody saw it, correct?
Do what?
If someone saw his notes,
Yes.
yes.
Is it a public record? You're sitting up there writing down your to-do list on the way home. No. But, if you added to that, trying to think.
Something like a pharmacy or something situation.
Well, right now it's exempt, and even if you put pharmacy information, it would be exempt. But if you put on there, need to call Robert Angelo to tell him about my conflict of interest, then
It's city,
that would
it's
be
gotta be reported.
Yeah. Let's see, social media is a public record, we talked about that. We have some cities with very robust interaction between members of the city commission and also members of planning and zoning boards and that kind of thing. And they, in their case, we've done as much as we can to educate them. Their comments are public record. They found, I think they have a vendor to preserve those Facebook posts for the city so that they're never lost. So if somebody said, I want to see those communications on social media, they can be produced. And then they typically have 2 social media pages on Facebook in particular. One for their personal stuff where they share their kids' straight A report card and invite you to church on Sunday and that kind of thing. And they've got another one that is their city business. And they may cross post, but that's the extent of it. So, and usually when they cross post, they turn off comments, or redirect comments back to the original post. And I'm not even sure of the propriety of that, but they do what they can to separate and preserve. If you don't have a private account and somebody posts on your public account some commentary on a matter of city business, screenshot it, send it to your city email. Let's see, must not engage in social media in an exchange or discussion of any matter that might foreseeably come before the board for action. That would be a violation of the Sunshine Law. So, again, you can start interacting in the same forum, where two of you are in the same forum on social media or on the same commentary thread, both talking about something that somebody posted about a rezoning of a project, and you're not necessarily talking to each other, but you're in that forum talking about it in each other's presence, and that can be a violation. So again, just best thing,
Best to not even get
just don't
involved.
get engaged if it's something that
Right.
might come before you.
Right.
So. And can't delete it. Let's see, district court properly enjoined Florida's unprecedented effort to strip online service providers of their constitutionally protected editorial judgment and replace it with a state's own judgment. Okay, that's according to a brief. Let's see. All right, so that wasn't concluded then, so that, I don't know what the outcome of that was. Texts are public records. At this point, if somebody sends you a text, I don't think, y'all don't have city cell phones, do you? Okay, so if somebody sends you a text regarding city business, screenshot it, and then email that screenshot over to your city email account. See, sending texts back and forth at the dais, same thing. We have had citizens comment on the appearance of impropriety when members of the board are texting back and forth at the dais, or texting in general. Two people, you may be texting a family member, you may be texting a family member, and you may be both doing it at the same time, and the perception from the people sitting out here is that you are texting each other. So, just be conscious of the notion that things you're doing there can be misperceived by members of the public when they're seeing you do it, and just have that in mind. So. Let's see, all right, that's, now if you're texting your spouse, again, it's not a public record, but if people out here don't know that, so. Records retention, we have to retain records, it's a requirement of law. There's a state adopted retention schedule, it's a book about this thick, and every type of record that you can think of, it talks about it in there and states what the retention policy is for that record for the city. The only records I think that really have to be kept forever in perpetuity are meeting minutes. Meeting agendas, meeting minutes, I think have to be kept forever. And others can be destroyed after a certain period of time. But you don't make that decision, let the city clerk and our office make that decision. See, public records requests, they're not required to be in writing, so long as it sufficiently describes the records being requested. The person requesting a public record doesn't have to show any particular, why they need it, they don't have to tell you. They're not required by law to provide their name or other identifying information except how it is they want us to get them the record, which can be simply, I'll come pick them up at your office, or I'll send a courier to your office to get them. I mean, somebody can completely remain unidentified in the public records request process. They just have to communicate to the city that they want them. I mean, they want them, and then they at least need to let the city know how they're going to, or communicate how they're going to retrieve them. And they can provide a mailing address, they can provide, they can say, I'll come pick them up, they can give an email address, whatever it is. But they don't have to identify who they are. There's an unlimited amount of requests that are allowed, but standing requests are not permitted. So you can't say, every month send me this. Here every month send me the utility bill from Joe's Crack Shack. Request it every month if you want it every month. The city can charge fees for if the volume of records is such a nature that it can create a burden on the city to produce them. And But what I would say is if anybody directs to you, and they could direct a records request directly to you as a member of the board. If you get a records request from somebody as a member of the board, you need to let me know, Robert know, and we will probably will engage in the clerk's office, who is Ms. Sykes is the person charged with responding to or coordinating the response to records requests. And so if you get it, reach out and let us know, and we'll take it from there. General rules, these are just, I think we're down to the last slide or two here. So these are things your mama taught you. If you think it might be wrong, it probably is. Don't get yourself into a situation that tempts you to do something wrong. Is there anyone who gives you something who doesn't want or expect something in return except your mother? Sometimes you can't even be sure about her. If grandkids are involved, you can't even be sure about them. So, people don't give elected officials or government employees gifts because they like them, but because they want something at best. It's a sense of obligation. And then can you ever really accept a gift that in some fashion doesn't influence you, if in no other way, to give somebody the 30 seconds to get the kind of thing. So those are the rules, and that is the end. Are there any questions that you follow? How quickly I did that, I can't see a clock in this direction.
Good job, protect yourself at all times.
Yeah. So, anyway, well, if no questions, that's my presentation. If you're asleep tonight and want to get you, reach out to me and we'll get an answer for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right, this time there is no further business on our agenda. So at this time, ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yep.
No. You want me to address that, reason that we're not gonna discuss that?
What's that?
The zoning map, the interactive zoning map?
Oh, I forgot. I didn't, to be honest, I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me. So yeah, you can go ahead and discuss it as long as we're still live. Okay.
Didn't you say that would be ex parte communication using the interactive zoning map on the website?
Yes. Now I remember what we're talking about. Yes, probably best not to discuss that. So anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll stand adjourned.